I always thought that love was enough. I believed if I gave without keeping count, if I sacrificed without asking for anything back, someday I'd be repaid with warmth, kindness, or at least a little respect. But I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I gave my home, the only home I ever owned, to my grandson Liam as a wedding gift. I did it with a full heart, no hesitation. He was 25, full of dreams, and about to start a new chapter with his wife Clara. I thought giving him the house would lift some weight off his shoulders. I didn't need much, just a quiet corner in my own home to spend the rest of my years. I imagined dinners together, maybe helping Clara around the kitchen, knitting in the evenings while they laughed in the living room. But just 3 months later, I was standing outside in the rain with a suitcase that barely held anything I owned, and a sharp voice behind me saying, "It's time you left. We need space. You're making things uncomfortable." I didn't cry, not then. I just nodded and walked. My knees ached with every step, but I kept moving. My heart wasn't just heavy, it was shattered. I had raised Liam after his parents died in a car accident when he was 6. I worked night shifts at the hospital, then early morning cleaning jobs just to feed him, clothe him, send him to school. I skipped meals so he could eat, skipped doctor visits so he could get braces, skipped sleep for years, and now I was an outsider in the house I had built with my husband before cancer took him from me. That house held every memory. Our wedding photo above the fireplace, the dent in the kitchen wall where Liam accidentally hit it with a toy truck, the creaky step on the stairs that always warned me when he was sneaking in late. I gave it all away thinking I was giving love a home. I didn't realize I was handing over a weapon that would be used to push me out. But what they didn't know was that I had left something behind, something very old, something no one ever thought to look for, something buried beneath the floorboards of the basement. I never told Liam, not once in all the years we lived there together, and now they were living on top of it without a clue. They thought they had won. They thought I had nothing left. But I smiled, even through the sting of betrayal, because I knew the day would come when they'd knock on my door, begging for help, and when that day arrived, I would not answer with tears. I would answer with silence and power. After I left the house, I didn't go far. I booked a small room in a budget motel just outside the city. The walls were thin, the bed creaked, and the water never stayed warm, but it gave me time to think. At 58, I never thought I'd be starting over like this. The last time I'd felt this lost was when my husband died, but back then I still had Liam. Back then, I still had purpose. Now, it felt like I was floating in the middle of a storm, with no anchor, no light, and no one to call. The silence was sharp. I stared at the ceiling most nights, replaying what Clara had said, how I was a burden, how their home should be for young people, and how she needed her privacy. Liam just stood beside her, eyes to the floor, not saying a word. His silence hurt worse than her words. I remembered how he used to hug me tight when he was a boy, always saying, "Grandma, you're my favorite person in the whole world." I remembered the time he got sick with the flu in 3rd grade, and I stayed up all night cooling his forehead with a damp cloth. I remembered how he cried when I dropped him off at school the first day, and now he couldn't even look me in the eye while his wife told me to get out of my own home. Not even a thank you, not even an apology, just coldness. But I kept my dignity. I didn't beg, I didn't shout. I just nodded and walked out that door with my small suitcase, the same one I used years ago when I ran away from home at 19. Funny how life circles back, but this time, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something I had kept quiet about for over 20 years. Back when my husband and I were still young and hopeful, we had made a plan. We never had much money, but we had one asset, land. He'd inherited a small piece of property from his grandfather, hidden deep in the records, never claimed or developed. Before he passed, he made me promise to keep it safe, to never talk about it, and to hide the original deed in a place no one would think to look. So we built a hidden compartment beneath the basement floorboards, beneath the old workbench, under layers of concrete. Inside it, we placed not just the land deed, but also a safety deposit key, our marriage certificate, and something else, a small box wrapped in blue velvet. Even I hadn't opened it since the day he died. I never needed to. But now? Now it might be time. I had a reason to go back, not to them, but to the house. Not out of attachment, but because the one thing they didn't understand was that the gift they thought they received had never fully belonged to them. They held the walls, the roof, the title, but the real value lay in the ground beneath their feet, and only I knew how to access it. I sipped cheap coffee from a paper cup and smiled for the first time in days. Let them enjoy their new life. Let them feel proud, smug even. Their day of reckoning was already ticking closer. 3 weeks passed. I kept to myself, watched the days change from the dusty window of the motel room, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. Every so often I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, almost calling Liam, almost asking why. But I stopped myself every time. If someone can throw you out of your own home without blinking, they don't deserve your voice. Instead, I focused on gathering what I needed. I still had an old set of keys, one for the tool shed, one for the back door, and one for the basement padlock, which I had quietly added when Liam was still a teenager. He never noticed. He was always too busy with school, video games, and then later, Clara. The basement had always been Grandma's space, and he respected that. Or maybe he just didn't care. Late one night, I visited the county records office. I used the parcel number from an old envelope my husband had written on years ago. I wasn't sure if the land was still valid under our name, but when the woman at the desk typed it into her system, she raised her eyebrows. "Ma'am, this is listed as undeveloped high ground. That area is worth a lot now. You sure this is yours?" I just nodded, holding out the dusty folder with the original deed. She looked at it, then looked at me again, long and curious. "You sitting on gold, Miss Turner," she said. Literally. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but anticipation. They had thrown me out like an old rag, thinking they had taken everything, but I still had the key to something they couldn't buy or bully their way into. The funny part? I could have told them. I could have given them that land just like I gave them the house. But now? Now they'd have to earn even a conversation. The next morning, I packed my things and left the motel. I didn't go far. I moved into a small, clean rental just outside the city, near the edge of town. I bought new clothes, updated my old flip phone to a smart one, and started researching real estate lawyers. Not because I was planning revenge, at least not yet, but because I wanted to understand every right I still held. And the more I read, the more I realized the house may have been in Liam's name now, but what was hidden underneath? That was mine. No signature, no transfer, no trust papers ever touched it. It wasn't even listed on the property inspection when I had the basement refinished 10 years ago. Completely invisible, unless you knew where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns out. What I felt now was deeper, a kind of stillness that comes when you see the truth without emotion. They had shown me who they were. They thought I was weak, slow, irrelevant. But they were about to learn that people like me don't disappear. We wait. And when the moment is right, we rise, quietly, cleanly, without warning. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, just after 3 when the sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk. I was sitting in the little kitchen of my rental, peeling apples for pie like I used to when Liam was small, when my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "Can we talk, Grandma?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew that tone. That soft, pitiful voice Liam used to use when he broke a vase and wanted to avoid punishment. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another message came. "We didn't mean it like that. Clara and I we were stressed. Things got out of hand." Still, I said nothing. Then my phone rang. I let it buzz until it stopped, but it started again 2 minutes later. On the 3rd call, I answered. Not because I wanted to hear his voice, but because I wanted to hear how he'd say it. "Grandma," he started, his voice shaky. I didn't know how else to reach you. Please don't hang up." I stayed quiet. "There's something weird going on in the basement," he said. Now that got my attention. "What kind of weird?" I asked slowly, keeping my tone flat. "Well, it's hard to explain," he said. "There's this locked panel under the old tool bench. We tried to open it, but we can't. Not even with tools. And there's this, like, sound. A low hum. Clara thinks it's something mechanical, maybe electrical wiring, but I remember you always said not to mess with that area. Is there something we should know?" I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "It's nothing for you to worry about." "Grandma," he whispered, "just tell us, please." That please didn't land the way he thought it would, because the memory was too fresh. Me standing in the hallway with a plastic bag of clothes while Clara stared down her nose at me and said, "We need to start our life without extra baggage." Like I was clutter. "You didn't care what was in the basement when you asked me to leave," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You told me the house was yours now. I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that, Liam." He fell silent. Then softly he said, "We might have made a mistake." I let out a quiet breath and leaned back in my chair. "You made a choice," I said, "and choices have weight." Before he could say more, I ended the call. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Whatever they thought was hidden down there, their curiosity was only just beginning, and I wanted them to feel every second of it. 3 days later, I got another call, this time from Clara. I recognized her clipped tone the moment she spoke. Polished, practiced, like someone used to winning arguments and getting her way. But this time, there was something different under her voice. A tight edge. Worry. "Margaret," she said, forcing sweetness into her words, "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I smiled faintly, letting her continue. "I'll be honest, we didn't understand how much the house meant to you. We were overwhelmed, and maybe we handled things poorly. But Liam and I have been thinking, and we'd really like to make things right." I could almost hear her rehearsing it in the mirror, but before I could say anything, she added, "Also, we might need your help." There it was. She launched into her explanation. How they brought in a contractor to renovate the basement. New flooring, maybe build a gym. But when they started tearing things up near the tool bench, they found reinforced concrete. And beneath that, what looked like a sealed hatch. "It's locked from the inside," she said, voice tightening. "Or at least that's what the guy said. It's strange. Really strange. There's no visible keyhole. No wiring, just this old steel plate. Heavy. The contractor said it doesn't match the rest of the house's build." I said nothing. "We found a safe once at my grandfather's house," she continued. "It had gold bars inside. Family inheritance. We thought maybe—" I cut her off. "You thought there might be something valuable?" She hesitated. "Well, yes, and if it belonged to your husband, maybe it's technically still yours." Now I laughed, just once, low and sharp. "Now you care about what's mine." Silence. Then she said, "We're willing to split whatever's in there." I leaned forward, my fingers tightening around the phone. "Let me be clear, Clara. You kicked me out of that house. You told me I was an extra burden. You and Liam made your position loud and clear. That house may be in your name, but not everything inside it belongs to you. Some things were never meant to be found by people like you." She bristled. "People like me? People who confuse kindness with weakness." Before she could respond, I hung up. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could almost picture them pacing the floor of that cold basement, hands on their hips, whispering theories. Treasure? Inheritance? Secrets? I wanted them to feel the uncertainty crawl under their skin like ants. Let them wonder what they'd thrown away when they pushed me out. Let them think about the value of things they couldn't touch, couldn't force open, couldn't own. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about power. And I had it now. Every last bit of it. The next time Liam called, his voice had changed. The defensiveness was gone. So was the pride. What was left sounded like a man unraveling. "Grandma," he said, barely above a whisper, "please, I know we messed up. Clara and I have been fighting. She blames me for everything. She says I ruined her chance at a better life. I didn't know it would turn out like this. I listened in silence. There's something inside that basement. I can feel it. It's driving us crazy. We've tried everything, contractors, locksmiths, even scanners. No one can get it open. Everyone keeps asking if it's a bomb shelter or some old hidden vault. They're starting to think we're lying about it. You are, I said flatly. What? He breathed. You're lying to yourselves, pretending the house is truly yours. But it never was. It was a gift, and you treated it like trash. You treated me like trash. He let out a shaky breath. Grandma, I was scared. When you told me you weren't working anymore, I panicked. Clara was already pressuring me. Her family thinks I'm a failure. I wanted to be in control of something. I thought if we had the house, we could finally feel secure. But everything's falling apart. She barely looks at me anymore. She calls me a leech. Said I let her bully an old woman. Said I was spineless. I could almost picture his face, sunken with guilt, maybe even fear. He'd never imagined the ground beneath his feet was borrowed, that the woman he discarded held the real keys to everything. I didn't tell Clara this, he added, but I remembered something. Years ago, I walked into the basement and saw you sitting by that bench. You had a metal box on your lap and a flashlight in your hand. When you noticed me, you hid it fast. You told me to go back upstairs. I stayed silent. He continued, his voice growing more desperate. I didn't think about it then, but now, that box. Was it yours? Yes, I said calmly. What was in it? Something you lost the right to ask about the day you told me I didn't belong. The line went quiet. Then very softly he said, I'm sorry. I could hear the truth in his voice. But the thing about sorry, it doesn't fix cracks. It doesn't rebuild what was shattered when someone you raised like your own turns you into nothing more than a liability. You'll understand one day, I whispered. Not when you break something, but when someone breaks you. And then I ended the call. Let him sit with that. Let the silence eat at him the way their betrayal ate at me. A week passed, then another. No more calls, no more messages, just silence. I thought maybe they'd given up, moved on, let the basement become just another sealed door in a house built on betrayal. But people like Clara didn't let go when they smelled the possibility of wealth. She was too proud to beg me herself again, but she found a new way. It started with a knock on the door of my small rental. I looked through the peephole and felt my heart tighten. It was Clara's mother. I hadn't seen her in years, not since the wedding, where she had told me, in the most polite tone possible, that she hoped her daughter would elevate the family name. Now she was standing on my doorstep in a beige coat, with a purse clutched tight against her chest, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Margaret, she said when I opened the door, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I didn't move aside. What do you want? She laughed softly, like we were two old friends sharing tea. Oh, I just thought I'd come clear the air. You know how young couples can be. Rash decisions, heated words. Liam and Clara regret what happened. Deeply. They've been under stress. You understand, don't you? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You didn't come to make peace. Her face twitched. The smile cracked a little. They found the box, she said plainly. I didn't blink. They can't open it, but they're sure it's valuable. Clara asked me to speak with you, woman to woman. We don't have to involve lawyers or family drama. Just tell us how to open it. You can even take half, or more. We'll pretend this never happened. I stared at her, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I said, You ever bake bread, Susan? She blinked. Excuse me? Bread, the kind you need for 20 minutes, let rise overnight, then bake for hours. My husband loved it. I used to make it every week. You know what happens if you skip a step? She frowned. I don't see how. It collapses, I said. Looks fine from the outside, but the inside's hollow. Just like your daughter's marriage. Just like your apology. Her face flushed. Now hold on. I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing but shame. You think you can just show up and make that disappear with sweet words and a forced smile? She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. You tell Clara this, I continued. That box was sealed with a code only I know. Even if they blast through the concrete, they'll find a steel vault that won't open for anyone but me. And the day I decide they've earned access, is the day the sky turns green. Her hands tightened on her purse strap. I gave her a look that made her flinch. Now get off my porch. And I closed the door in her face. Behind the wood, I listened to the sound of her heels clicking angrily down the steps. I felt no fear, no regret. Only a calm that comes when you finally stop letting people mistake your kindness for weakness. They hadn't hit rock bottom yet, but they were getting closer. The very next morning, I got a call from the lawyer who handled the original deed transfer to Liam. His voice was polite, measured, but I could hear discomfort under his words. "Miss Turner," he said, "I hope you don't mind the call. I've been contacted by your grandson and his wife regarding some irregularities in the basement of the property you gifted them." I let out a quiet breath. "Irregularities?" "Yes, ma'am. They're inquiring about access to what they described as a subterranean chamber. According to their description, it contains a sealed vault of unknown origin and contents. Legally, it falls under the property they now own, but, I asked, keeping my tone even. "Well," he hesitated, "unless there's documentation showing that it was part of the property at the time of the title transfer, it technically falls outside the scope of the deed, especially if it was not listed in the home inspection or included in the valuation, which it wasn't." I smiled faintly. "So they own the house, but not what's buried in it." "Correct," he said. "And if it can be proven that the contents belong to you, well, then they're legally obligated to return them or face consequences for obstruction or tampering." "I see. They've requested a meeting," he added. "Offered to split any proceeds or profits from the contents if you'll simply come by and help them unlock it." I laughed, soft and bitter. "Did they offer that before or after trying to dig it up without me?" He didn't answer. "Tell them no," I said. "Miss Turner, if I may," the lawyer added carefully, "they seem desperate. I don't know what's in that vault, but it's tearing their household apart. And legally, you have the upper hand. You could file a civil claim right now and win." "I know," I said calmly, "but I'm not ready to end this yet." He went quiet. "Let them feel the cracks," I continued. "Let them sit in that house every day, looking at a box they can't open. Let them think about what they lost." I could hear the slow exhale on the other end. Maybe he thought I was being cruel, but he didn't know the whole story. He didn't hear Clara's voice that night, cold and smug, telling me to find a place that fits my age. He didn't see Liam turn away, pretending not to care. They had made their bed. Now they were lying on top of a secret they couldn't touch. A secret I had protected for over 20 years. Not because it was treasure, not because it was money, but because it was the last piece of a man who loved me when no one else did. And I would not hand that over to two people who couldn't even love me as a human being. Let them beg. Let them wonder. This story was far from over. 2 weeks passed, and I didn't hear a word. Not from Liam, not from Clara, not even from that overly polite lawyer. I almost thought they'd given up. Maybe they finally accepted the vault was out of reach. But deep down, I knew people like them never surrendered quietly. They just waited until they could change the angle of attack. And I was right. It started with whispers. A call from a neighbor who lived 3 houses down from my old place. Her voice was low and nervous. "Margaret, I thought you should know. Clara's been telling folks that you've been hiding something illegal in the basement. She said there might be forged documents, maybe old cash, unreported assets, that it might be why you left so suddenly." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. "She's also been saying you manipulated Liam into signing over the house when he was too young to understand what it meant. That you used guilt, that maybe the vault was meant to control him. People are talking, Margaret. Of course they were. That was Clara's talent, twisting reality into a sob story. She'd always known how to dress cruelty up in concern." I thanked the neighbor and hung up, unsurprised. If she couldn't open the vault, she'd try to poison everything around it. Make the town question me. Make them see her as the victim. Make me look unstable, manipulative, maybe even criminal. But I was ready. I drove straight to the storage unit where I had carefully packed away every piece of proof. Receipts, contracts, notarized copies, photographs. I even had the security cam footage from the week I was forced out. The one where Liam stood aside as Clara handed me a garbage bag and said, "Take your things and go." That night, I uploaded everything to a secure cloud. Organized, labeled, dated. I wasn't planning to release it. Not yet. But I wanted it ready. Because something told me Clara wasn't done. Sure enough, the very next evening, a woman approached me while I was picking out vegetables at the market. She was young, polite, but the moment she smiled and said she was from a local community paper, I knew what this was. "Miss Turner, would you mind answering a few questions about your family? There have been rumors about—" "No," I said calmly, cutting her off. "But no," I repeated, firmer this time. She walked away, disappointed, but I saw her phone still recording as she turned. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to, because soon enough the truth would speak for itself. Not with shouting, not with stories, with silence, and then undeniable proof. They were trying to turn the town against me, but they forgot something important. You can build lies on top of a house, but you can't build over truth buried in the foundation. 3 days later, Liam showed up at my door. Not a call, not a message. He stood there in the middle of the afternoon, hair messy, shirt untucked, shadows deep under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. He looked smaller than I remembered, like something had folded in on itself. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. The one who ran into my arms after school, scraped knees and all, but then he spoke. "Grandma, please, I don't know what to do anymore." I didn't invite him in. He glanced behind him like someone might be watching. Then he looked at me, hands shaking slightly. "Clara's threatening to leave. She says the house is cursed, that whatever's in that basement is ruining our lives. We've had 3 contractors refuse to come back. One guy said the walls feel wrong. Another said he had nightmares after walking down there." I said nothing, just watched him. "She told her family it's your fault, said you must have done something, put some kind of spell or trap down there. Now her mother's telling everyone I'm mentally unstable, that I dragged her daughter into some creepy inheritance mess." He swallowed hard. "I'm losing everything," he whispered. "Clara barely talks to me. She sleeps in the guest room. We argue every day. She says I ruined her life, that I brought shame to her family. She wants to sell the house now just to get away from it. But no one will buy it with that basement sealed shut. Everyone thinks we're hiding something." I leaned against the doorframe. "You are." He looked up. "I know." I raised an eyebrow. "I lied to people about you," he admitted, voice cracking. "Told them you left us, that you were bitter. I didn't want to look like the bad guy, but it didn't help. It just made everything worse." He looked completely undone. No pride, no ego, just a young man unraveling in front of the one person he thought he'd never need again. "I miss you," he said quietly. "I miss how things used to be. I know I don't deserve anything. I wanted to be someone Clara could be proud of. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being your grandson and started being her project. I let her convince me that you were holding us back." I exhaled slowly. My heart ached, but it didn't soften. "You didn't just let her convince you," I said. "You agreed with her." He nodded, eyes filling. "I did, and I regret it every single day." Silence hung between us, heavy like a storm waiting to break. "Grandma, if there's a way to fix things, even if it takes time, can I try?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because forgiveness was a gift, and I wasn't sure if he had earned it, but I saw the first crack in his armor, the first real sign that maybe, just maybe, guilt was doing the work that kindness couldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Liam's words echoed in my mind, bouncing off memories I'd buried deep. His face, so tired and worn, reminded me of the boy who once begged me not to leave him alone on his first day of school, the boy who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms and fall asleep clinging to my hand. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had stood by silently while I was thrown out of my own home without a coat. Regret doesn't erase cruelty. Apologies don't undo betrayal. Still, Something about the way he looked at me, like he finally saw the cost of what he'd done, stayed with me. I sat by the window in my small rental, watching the streetlight flicker, wondering if it was possible to forgive someone who had only come back because their life was falling apart. But it wasn't just about Liam anymore. It was about me. About the life I had spent 30 years giving to someone who never asked why I gave so much or what I had given up to do it. He never asked why I had no retirement plan, no savings, no vacation stories. He never questioned why I always had just enough for him, but never enough for myself. I had built my world around his comfort, his needs, his future, and when it no longer served him, he erased me from it. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. Inside an old shoebox, wrapped in fabric my husband had loved, was the key, the real key. The one that opened the inner vault beneath the basement floor, where my husband had hidden what he called the heart of our legacy. I hadn't touched it in years. I held it in my hand now, the metal cool against my skin. I stared at it for a long time, weighing what it meant. It wasn't just about the documents or the assets anymore. It was about boundaries, about finally doing something for myself, on my terms, without being manipulated by guilt or tears or promises of change. I returned the key to the box and slid it back into its place. Then I pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing. Not a letter, not instructions, a list, what they took, what I gave, what I deserve. Every line felt like a stitch pulling my soul back together. They wanted access to what I had buried. But now I understood. What mattered wasn't what they found in that basement. It was what they lost the moment they stopped treating me like family. And no key on earth could unlock that. By the end of the week, the whispers in town had grown louder. People I barely knew started greeting me differently at the grocery store. Warmer, gentler, some even apologetic without saying why. I knew why. Word was spreading that something big had gone wrong in Liam and Clara's marriage. And I could guess who was controlling the story. It wasn't me. I hadn't spoken to anyone about the vault or the house or what had really happened the day they kicked me out. But Clara? She was busy spinning her version of events, one where I had manipulated them, hidden assets, and stirred up trouble out of jealousy and spite. She even claimed I had blackmailed her husband into signing the house over. I heard from an old friend who heard from her cousin, who heard it straight from Clara's lips at a dinner party. She never really wanted us to be happy, Clara had said. She always resented me. I think she was planning this for years. That vault, probably nothing but old junk, but she's letting it ruin our lives. I laughed when I heard it. Of course she'd call it junk. That's how people like her see things they can't touch, can't understand, can't take. But the truth? That vault held more than money. It held the last will my husband wrote. Unfiled, yes, but signed, witnessed, and notarized. It named me sole owner of the land that would one day become some of the most valuable property in the state. It included the coordinates, the surveys, and the mineral rights, something no one in that house had any clue existed. And now that the area was being considered for development, that land would be worth more than the house itself. The only problem? It was still buried, still untouched. I hadn't decided if I wanted to unearth it. Letting it sit there was starting to feel more powerful than cashing it in. Because now, I had something Clara couldn't fake her way into. Something Liam couldn't cry his way into. Something locked beneath the home they thought they owned. Proof of how much I'd given and how little they deserved it. Later that afternoon, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. I opened it slowly. Attached was a scanned letter, short, handwritten. Dear Grandma, I know you probably hate me, but I miss you. Not the house, not the vault, you. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. Love, Liam. It should have warmed me. It didn't, because I knew what it really was, a test. A toe dipped into the waters of forgiveness just to see if I'd bite. But this wasn't about who missed who anymore. This was about who still believed they deserved a place in my life. And Liam wasn't there yet. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at my kitchen table, flipping through the morning paper with a cup of tea, when I saw a headline printed halfway down the local news page. Mystery vault in historic home sparks curiosity. Is there treasure beneath Maple Lane? My heart stopped for a second. I read every word, my fingers tightening on the edge of the paper. It was a short article, clearly meant to entertain more than inform, but it named the street. It named the house. It mentioned rumors of a sealed vault under the basement, discovered by the new homeowners during recent renovation plans, and quoted an unnamed source saying, "They think it belonged to the grandmother who used to live there." So now it was public. Clara had taken it to the press. Whether for sympathy or attention, or maybe both, she'd leaked it. And though the article didn't mention me by name, it didn't need to. Everyone in that neighborhood knew who used to live there. It wouldn't take long before the gossip rolled back in my direction. For a moment, I just stared at the words, my mind racing. Not with fear, but with clarity. This was desperation. She wasn't just after the contents anymore. She was trying to apply pressure. Make it public. Force my hand. Maybe she thought if enough people talked about it, I'd give in just to avoid the noise. But what she didn't realize was that I had lived through worse. Raised a child with pennies. Buried a husband with no life insurance. Cleaned houses while my back screamed just to make sure Liam never went to school hungry. A few headlines weren't going to break me. Still, it lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not shame, power. I picked up the phone and called Monica, my old real estate agent, the only one who had treated me with real respect when I bought my current home. She picked up on the first ring. "Miss Turner, what a surprise. How are you?" "I'm thinking of selling," I said, "but only if you help me buy something else." She paused, confused. "Of course. What are you looking for?" I looked out the window, letting a small smile creep across my lips. "I want the house across from Liam and Clara's," I said. "The one with the garden, the porch swing. Let me know if it's up for sale." She laughed softly. "Planning to keep an eye on them?" "Something like that. Because if they wanted to play games in the public eye, I'd make sure they saw the full weight of my silence. Every time they looked out their front window and saw the woman they tried to erase, living peacefully just steps away, with the only key to what they were dying to open. Monica called me back 2 days later with a tone of disbelief in her voice. "You won't believe this, Miss Turner. The house across from your old place? The owner just put it on the market this morning. Said they're retiring early and moving down south. If you want it, I can fast-track everything." It felt like fate had reached across the street and handed me a gift wrapped in poetic justice. "I want it," I said without hesitation. "Cash deal, no back and forth." The next morning, we signed the paperwork. I didn't even ask for a tour. I didn't need to see the inside. The only thing I cared about was the view from the front porch and the sight of Liam and Clara's house across the road, still polished on the outside but crumbling from within. On move-in day, I stood on that porch with a cup of coffee, watching as Clara stepped out to water the hedges. She didn't see me at first. When she finally looked up and locked eyes with me, she froze, the hose in her hand still running, soaking her shoes. She didn't wave. Neither did I. I simply turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. Hours later, the first knock came. I didn't answer. Then came another the following morning. This time it was Liam. He stood on my new porch holding a plastic container. Apple pie, my recipe. I opened the door just enough to see his face. His eyes were puffy like he hadn't slept, and his shoulders were hunched the way they used to be when he knew he'd done wrong. "I baked this for you," he said. "Well, I tried." I didn't touch it. He set the container on the porch railing and took a step back. "Clara's gone to stay with her parents. She says I'm obsessed. That the house feels haunted. Not with ghosts, but with guilt." I stayed silent. "I tried to forget about the vault," he continued. "Tried to pretend it didn't matter, but it does. Not because of what's inside, but because I know I don't deserve to open it, and it's killing me." His voice cracked then. A real crack. Not the kind meant to win sympathy, the kind that came from a fracture finally splitting wide open. I keep thinking about everything you did for me, all those years, all that love, and I let someone talk me into treating you like an unwanted guest. I let her throw you out, and I stood there like a coward." I looked at him, really looked. This wasn't the same boy I raised, but maybe, just maybe, it was the first glimpse of the man he should have been all along. Still, I said only one thing before I gently closed the door. "You haven't suffered enough to understand what you threw away." And I left him standing on that porch, with his pie, his guilt, and the ghost of his own choices. I thought that might be the end of it. But guilt is a strange thing. It doesn't fade, it festers. And for people like Liam, people who build their comfort on the backs of others, it starts to eat from the inside out once the silence gets too loud. He didn't stop trying. He left handwritten notes in my mailbox, short ones, apologies that danced around the truth but never quite touched it. Sometimes it was a flower in a jar. Once it was an envelope with a picture. Him at 8 years old, sitting on the porch of my old house with ice cream dripping down his chin. I remember that day. He had cried because the scoop fell off the cone, and I'd gone back to the shop and bought him 2 more, just to see him smile again. He wrote on the back, "You always showed up for me. I wish I had done the same." It almost made me cry. Almost. But then I remembered the night he stood behind Clara, watching her shove my bags toward the door. I remembered how he looked away when she said, "It's better if you just go." That memory always came back sharp enough to cut through whatever softness tried to rise in me. A week later, something changed. I was out for a walk when I noticed a moving truck in front of Liam's house. At first, I thought maybe Clara had returned to pack up her things, but when I looked closer, I saw Liam himself loading boxes, alone. That evening, a knock came. I opened the door to find him standing there with nothing in his hands. "She's gone," he said quietly. "Filed for divorce. Took what little we had in the joint account and left. Didn't even say goodbye." I didn't say anything. I didn't offer sympathy. "I deserved it," he added. "I kept thinking you were the one who ruined things, but the truth is, I did. I let pride and pressure convince me that love should be convenient. And when you stopped being useful, I let someone treat you like garbage." He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "I sold the house." Now I raised my eyebrows. "It's done," he said. "I'll be gone in a few days. But before I leave, I want to know what was in that vault. Not because I want to take it. Not because I think I deserve it. But because I need to know what I almost destroyed." For the first time in months, I really looked at him. Not as the boy I raised, not as the man who betrayed me, but as someone finally stripped of ego. A man with nothing left to hide behind, and I saw something different, not redemption, not yet, but truth, and that was a start. I didn't give him an answer that night. Instead, I watched from my window 2 days later as he loaded the last box into a rusted sedan. No more moving truck, no wife, no onlookers, just Liam, alone, tired and quiet, pulling away from the house he once claimed with so much pride. The house I had built with love, held together with sacrifice, and handed to him with trembling hands, only for him to use it as a stage to forget who gave it to him. I waited until the street was empty. Then I walked across to the house. It was strange being back. The air smelled different, like emptiness. No laughter, no footsteps, just dust and silence. I moved slowly, not because of my age, but because of the weight of memory pressing down on my chest. The hallway still had the crack in the wall from when Liam hit it with his skateboard. The kitchen still had the tiny scorch mark on the counter from the time he tried to make pancakes at age 10. I walked down into the basement. The air was cool, still. The tool bench was just as I left it, except now the floor had been scraped and scratched, proof that someone had tried to force their way into the vault. But they had failed, because what I built with my husband wasn't just sealed with concrete and steel. It was sealed with care, with a plan. I knelt down, feeling the floor for the hidden switch. My knees cracked as I bent, 58 years and every one of them speaking through my joints. I pressed the latch. A soft click echoed through the room, and a narrow panel slid open to reveal the safe, untouched, undisturbed. I opened it with the old brass key. Inside was everything: the deed to the land, original mining rights, letters from my husband, each one labeled with years, filled with thoughts, advice, hope, and the small velvet pouch that held the antique coins passed down from his grandfather. Not worth millions, maybe, but worth something much deeper to me. On top of the documents, I placed a single sheet of paper, freshly written. It was a letter to Liam. This was never about gold, never about land. It was about legacy, about memory, about love so deep I buried it where no one could ruin it. You threw me away without asking why I had given you everything, but you're learning now what life costs, and I'm glad, because I never wanted revenge. I wanted understanding. If you ever come back, not for what's in the vault, but for what was lost between us, then maybe we'll talk. Until then, this remains closed. Grandma. I closed the safe, locked it again, and walked back upstairs. Not to stay, not to reclaim anything, but to remind myself that some treasures aren't meant to be cashed in. Some are meant to be buried. Until someone finally learns how to dig the right way. The house sold quietly, not to anyone from town. The buyer was someone from out of state, an investor, Monica told me, paid above asking, never stepped foot inside. Probably didn't care about the basement or the story tangled up in its foundation, just another address in a portfolio. To him, it was property. To me, it was a chapter I finally closed. After the sale went through, I had the documents from the vault transferred to a private legal firm downtown. I set up a trust, clean, airtight, and final. The land, the mining rights, the assets, all under my name. And I added a clause. Should I pass, everything would go to a local foundation that funds housing for single mothers and grandmothers raising children on their own. Not a cent would go to Liam. He had told the world he didn't want my money. I believed him. Now I was going to honor that. Weeks went by and life grew quiet again, peaceful. The flowers outside my window bloomed soft and slow. I painted in the mornings, walked in the afternoons, read by the fire in the evenings. The air smelled like spring, fresh, forgiving. I breathed deeper, smiled more. Then one Sunday afternoon, I received a letter. No return address, just my name, written in that crooked handwriting I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Inside was a photo of the two of us. Liam was maybe 5, covered in flour, sitting on the kitchen counter while I baked bread. We were both laughing, truly laughing. On the back, he had written, "I don't want anything, I just wanted to remember this part of us." There was no apology, no request, no return address, just memory. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not out of anger, not from pain, but because maybe, finally, he understood. Understanding isn't loud. It doesn't knock on your door and ask to be let in. It sits quietly at a distance, waiting to be felt. And in that moment, I felt it. He had nothing left to take, but maybe, just maybe, he had finally started to give something back, even if all he could offer was the truth. Months passed. The town moved on. New families settled in, old ones drifted out, and the whispers that once followed me like shadows faded into quiet nods of recognition at the market and soft greetings in the park. No one talked about the vault anymore. No one asked about Liam or Clara. Life, as it always does, chose to move forward, whether you're ready or not. I spent my days in calm routines, morning tea on the porch, tending to my garden, brushing off the dust from old canvases and painting again. I even joined a local women's group, mostly other grandmothers who knew what it felt like to give everything and sometimes receive very little in return. We shared stories, laughter, even tears over forgotten husbands, ungrateful children, and the dreams we'd shelved for others. It was in their company that I finally began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Whole. Not because I had more money or security, not because I had won some silent war, but because for the first time I was living for myself. One afternoon, I sat by the lake near my house with a canvas in front of me, painting the way sunlight played across the water. My hands moved slowly, but with confidence. No rush, no audience, just me and the colors. A young woman walked by with her toddler, smiled at me, and said, "That's beautiful." I looked up, surprised. "Thank you." "Did you paint all your life?" she asked. I hesitated, then smiled. "No, I used to be too busy giving my life to someone else." She laughed, not fully understanding, but I did. That night, I pulled out a small journal I had started years ago, one I had stopped writing in the day Liam and Clara asked me to leave. I flipped through the old pages. Some were filled with dreams, others with heartbreak. And then, on the last page, I began to write again. Today, I forgave myself. Not for what I gave away, not for the sacrifices I made, but for staying too long where I was never truly seen. I forgave myself for loving people who loved me only when it was easy, for thinking that being quiet was the same as being respected, for mistaking tolerance for peace. And then I wrote something else. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-burial. I know that now, and I'm done burying myself for people who never once brought a shovel to help dig me out. I closed the journal, set it back in the drawer, and poured myself a glass of wine. I thought about Liam from time to time. I wondered if he found a job, if he ever told the truth about me to others, if he still carried guilt in his chest like a stone he couldn't put down. But I didn't need to know, because some stories don't need a reunion. They don't need a bow or a big ending. Sometimes the best closure is choosing not to reopen the door, no matter who comes knocking. My story didn't end when I lost my home. It began when I realized I was the home, and now I was finally living in me, fully, freely, and without apology.